Oh boy, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Landy Lodge, where today we're talking about Final Fantasy XVI and some of the ancient wisdom embedded within that game. Our guest tonight is Andy Bru. You know him, big friend of the Lodge. He's dropping in here pretty often, but without these beautiful sages of the Lodge right before me over here, we wouldn't be able to pull this off. So a lot of love and a major shout out to them before we get today's episode going. We're talking about a lot of things. We're going to be talking about the biblical influences in Final Fantasy XVI, some of the Greco-Roman influences in Final Fantasy XVI, Carl Jung's influences on Final Fantasy XVI, and we'll get into some hero's journey stuff as well. But again, there was so much inspiration and influence in this game that I felt it was worthy of a podcast to discuss it and bring it home. So, without further ado, allow me to welcome today's guest, none other than the great Andy Bru. Andy, what's going on, dude? How's it going?
Good. I am here in the lodge, ready to talk about Final Fantasy XVI, post FF16, I should say. Now that we have both ran through the game at least once, there is got some things to talk about.
Dude, I mean, again, I've been saying it kind of as a joke, but I also mean it. That last podcast we did ended up aging quite well. And, we made some
Yeah.
story predictions here and there, but we also kind of talked
Mhm.
about some of the symbolism we thought the game was alluding to. And we
Yeah.
ended up being, quite on the money with that kind of stuff, too. Now, I said a little something in the intro for the audience, but I did mention that you are very, very, very knowledgeable in Christianity, and that this game in particular has so much biblical influence. So I figured maybe you could kick things off, get us started. What was really the first thing to jump out at you, or
Oh
perhaps maybe
man.
the thing that hit you the hardest in particular?
Oh man. Well, I think there's two different things there for me. So the first thing and I guess we'll just jump straight into it. Like I
Yeah.
don't
Okay.
have
So by the
anything.
way, let me just one more.
Yeah.
Like the biggest spoilers you
Spoilers.
can imagine.
Yes.
Like the
Like
biggest
this is the spoiler podcast of all time.
of all
So,
time.
yes. Um yeah, so I think one of the big ones for me. This is one of the first thing that really caught my attention, and so like I tend to catch more of this stuff on a second playthrough, but like there was just some stuff like on my first playthrough that I was like, it's just so obviously like
Mm-hmm.
there's such an obvious Christian influence here. And the first thing that hit me was right before the time skip. It's after, and again, spoilers, after Sid's death,
Mm-hmm.
and Joshua shows up while Jill and Clive are unconscious, and has this encounter with Ultima. And that's whenever you kind of learn a little bit about Ultima, or you learn who it is, that we saw come out of the crystal, or not come out of the crystal, but who it was that was there. And it's really crazy because it very much the whole scene reminded me a lot of like I guess like it kind of reminded me of like an interaction between like Jesus and the devil, where Joshua is obviously Jesus, and Joshua actually the name Joshua is actually like the what like an English iteration of
Yeah.
Jesus,
Like
right? So
Christ's
yeah,
name in the
yeah,
Bible is
Yeshua,
Yeshua.
Jesus,
Yeah.
yeah. So very, very, very
On the
similar.
nose.
Yeah. And so um that whole scene of like it's like Joshua is interceding for people he loves the most, and in the face of the evil one, right, in this story.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment where and this is so God, it's crazy, right? But like Joshua, he says like something like, you know, I won't let you have to go through me. I won't let you lay a hand on
You
them.
will
And
leave
he
my brother
my brother.
alone. Yo, gave me chills the
And
first time,
oh
second time,
dude,
third time.
I
Always gets me,
mean,
dude.
even like whenever he encircles Ultima in the flames, Ultima's like, these are not flames of destruction.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that's alluding to the fact that Joshua is the Phoenix, right? Death rebirth, as we have talked about here, as you
he's a
have talked
creative,
about.
he's a creative
Yeah.
spirit. Like Phoenix is a
Hmm.
creative spirit in the way that Ifrit is a destructive spirit, which is
Right.
why you see them fuse later in the story. And we'll get into that a little bit more later. But yeah,
Yeah.
go on.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, like, I mean, so the Bible talks about how, like, Jesus, he has eyes of fire, right? And so, but it's not like it's more of like a compassionate,
Mm-hmm.
like, not a destructive fire,
The kind of fire that
and
cooks your food, something that brings
right.
something
It's a
something
fire.
new forth.
It's a fire that doesn't destroy you, but it makes you more refined. But in this case, right, Joshua encapsulates Ultima in this flame. And what does he do? He actually absorbs Ultima into himself, becoming the vessel for Ultima, because Ultima wanted
Right.
Clive as the vessel. And that's how I see the devil, right? Where he's like, he wants to destroy people.
Well, he wants
But
to
here,
use humanity as his vessel as a
yes,
whole, right?
right. He as like a vessel to basically just destroy people. Because at the end of the day, the devil, he manipulates. I believe he manipulates, and and because he wants to hurt God, so he's got to hurt his kids. That's
Mm-hmm.
basically what he does, and what I believe as a Christian. So Joshua takes on the vessel of Ultima, right? And he says, "Just try to reach my brother now." And I was like, "Oh!" And you can see the blood come out of his mouth too, like as he takes in the vessel. And it's such a parallel to, like, if you want to even just see Ultima, maybe not as the devil, but even as sin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Joshua
He's a
takes
fallen one.
on
Like, even when you get down to the
right.
base of what he is, he's this
Hmm.
alien whose home was
Yep.
destroyed, and so they had
Hmm.
to pillage another planet to kind of get their way of life back. Like, he is
Yeah.
a fallen one,
Yeah.
following that same archetype.
Yeah, and you'll see kind of, so it's Second Corinthians 5:21. It says, "He who knew no sin became sin, so that we might become the righteousness of God in Christ Jesus." So that's talking about, Paul's talking about Jesus there, of course, right? He knew no sin, he never sinned, he became sin. He took sin on himself, just as Joshua took in Ultima, so that Clive would not have to bear the burden and quite possibly the pain and the suffering of being Ultima's vessel, you
So
know.
let me ask you, what's going on here?
Mhm.
Like you're saying, with Joshua bringing on Ultima and Christ becoming sin in that way. So
Yeah.
is there any parallel to like the part in the Bible where Christ has to walk through the desert alone, and that's where he's confronted with the devil? Because
Yeah,
it's worth
yeah.
noting he
That's
got
Matthew 4.
yeah
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Like I
Yeah.
see a number of parallels here with that,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Because he came
Yeah,
here
yeah.
alone. He didn't come here
Mhm.
with Yote, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so, like, yeah, that's it's interesting because there's two in the Bible. There are two different places that Jesus goes in terms of, like, temptation. He's brought into the wilderness, and then the devil brings him up onto this high place, and he shows him, like, "Oh, if you bow to me, I'll give you all these things of the world if you worship me." And then Jesus says, "You shall not tempt the Lord your God," right? It's only him that you serve. Yeah, Joshua shows up alone, and that's very interesting because Joshua, for the majority of this game, is alone.
Mm-hmm.
And he has Yote with him, but Yote was not there when he went to confront Ultima. He
No.
went by himself. He and it's also just, I guess, the nature of, I feel like the nature of the Phoenix in Final Fantasy 16, or I guess the characteristics, right? Because every dominant has, the dominants very much align with the characteristics of their icon,
Mm-hmm.
where
Oh yeah.
Clive, oh, the rage, the vengeance, but also the desire to see change and justice. Joshua, the compassion, right? He could have so he took Ultima on himself. Jill, the the whenever she went back to the Iron Kingdom, she was as cold as ice to
Yeah.
those
Well, she had
people
to be
because
cold-hearted, right? She had to, in a
exactly,
sense, hollow out
right.
her heart
The
because they were, yeah,
stoicness, right?
exactly, because they were using her as
Yeah.
a weapon. Because if she didn't
Yep.
comply, they were just going to slit the children's throats in front of her.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. So all these all the characteristics of the dominants very much line up with their icons and with the Phoenix, and I love the contrast between. I love that there's specifically two dominants of fire. Like that's what our two dominants of the same element is in this game, because Ifrit is like pure destruction. The
Mhm.
Phoenix, pure resurrection, right? It's the flames of destruction versus the flames of being refined,
Yeah.
and you see that just with how Joshua interacts with people, with like even with Ultima, like yeah, like he's protecting his brother, but like he's like you can see that the love that he has for his brother and Jill is greater than the hatred that he has for Ultima.
Yes.
And it reminds me of a very I don't even remember who said it, but it's a pretty famous line of like, a soldier doesn't fight because he fears what's in front of him. A soldier fights because he loves what's behind him. And
Mm.
that's Joshua to a
Well, and
T.
I feel like that fits, right, symbolically,
Mhm.
because Clive was always about wanting to be Joshua's shield, right? Not
Yeah,
not being a
right.
sword,
Mhm,
figuratively
mhm.
speaking, about being a shield, defending something that's behind you, not like aggressing or, seeking forth something
Yeah.
destructive or combative as a
Mhm.
sword, as opposed to, like, again, symbolically as a shield. But that's, dude,
Yeah.
that's God, there's so much I want to get into, but
Yeah,
I also don't. You're also kind of spitting
specifically
right now, so I want to keep you on your flow.
yeah, sure thing. I mean, that's the big thing in all of that is like Joshua took on Ultima as a vessel, held Ultima in for years, and then, dude, we know what happened at the end of the game. Like
Hmm.
they got all those Ultima vessels, right? They brought Joshua and Clive, and dude, that was it for Joshua. Like, and I feel like I don't know. I feel like Joshua probably knew that like at some point he was gonna die. Like
I think he
he
knew the
was
whole time.
the whole time. The
That's why,
moment that he took Ultima in.
and every time Yote tried to help him or cure him or
Mhm.
offered him help, he was like,
Yep.
"Nope, give it to those
Yep.
who need it. I'm not long for this world." You know?
Right. Which is funny because there's a very similar thing with Jesus when he's talking to his disciples. He said he prophesies like his death and his resurrection, and the disciples have no idea what he's talking about. And even Peter's like, I won't let you lay a hand on them, and Jesus is like, get behind me, Satan. Like that, like this is the will of the Father that I have to do this, right? Joshua, he had to do that so that Clive would not become the vessel,
Yeah.
and gave up his life in the end. Uh, and it's funny because it's like, and dude, like in the back of my mind, it's like, okay, I have a feeling where this is going, you know, but when that scene actually happened, when Clive is holding Joshua in his arms, oh my gosh, dude, I cried a total of 4 times during
What are the four
FF16.
times? Can you point out the four times?
Yes, the first time was the Torgal side quest. Yeah, before all of like the
Wait,
all of
which
the other
one? Which
finale.
one?
The one where they go back home and they go on the boat, they go back home,
Hmm.
and Clive's like, "Oh, you were looking for me the whole time." Very wholesome,
Hmm.
like brought me to tears. The other 3 times were in during the finale, like almost
Oh wow!
like
Just bang,
yeah,
bang, bang.
yeah. It was. I think, oh, dude, I think I almost cried when Gav started crying at the end.
That
That
got me.
almost got me.
That
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 almost got me.
that not only got
Yeah,
me, it brought me because like Gav is,
yeah,
he's the silly goose for so much of the game,
sure.
and like it
Yeah,
just snapped me where I'm like smiling as they're hugging goodbye, like yeah, he's my
yeah,
boy.
yeah,
Then he
yeah.
just like starts crying, and
Well,
dude,
also,
I whiplashed. I
yeah,
whiplashed and would just like suddenly got emotional because if you recall earlier in the game and you're on your
doing
second
his side
playthrough now,
quest.
dude, not only
Oh,
doing the
okay,
side quest, I
okay,
was gonna
yeah,
say
yeah.
earlier in the game when you thank him for like I believe it's when he sniffs out Benedicta for you, and you go up to
Oh,
him and
yeah.
thank him, And he goes, I'm really not good with goodbyes, man. Let's not do this.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Dude,
Yeah.
and then only for him to cry at the goodbye at the end of the game. I was like, dude, Gav is such a good character, dude.
Well, I was thinking in more because what I was thinking was like you do a side quest right before, like, you go into the final battle. If you do the side quest that has Gav in it, and it's like he's talking about how like, I don't know if I can like follow in your footsteps. Like, I don't know if like I could be the one to like, take over like what you and Sid have done, and then like that's kind of like Clive passing the baton, right? And it's like it hits so much more when you do the side quest. But yeah, that got me.
Dude, this is like side quest the game. Like you
you gotta do them.
Quests.
Yep, that got me. Joshua's death, and just them just kind of Clive like looking like having like that flashback sequence or whatever, like that was good. And then, but dude, the one that got me the most was Jill at the very end. Dude, when she's looking across, she's looking on the horizon, and the sun's coming up. It's the dawn. And if you've done the side quest at the end of the game with Jill and Clive, she literally says, like, you are, like, my dawn, essentially.
Yep.
Like, and, oh, dude, like, and that
it's
doesn't...
the idea of, like, the dawn always comes, right?
Right.
That was sort
which
of
is
point.
But to fully understand
which
the
is
present
also,
situation, one must first
slight parallel
understand
here,
how
but
it
like,
came to be.
just as the sun rises every morning, the Son of God rose from the grave. So like the dawn always comes. There's light at the end of the tunnel. So
Let us
those were
begin
like,
with the story
those were all the
Hugo
times that I
Finca,
recall.
or the permanent economic advisor to the Dalmatian
But yeah, there's,
government,
I mean,
to give him his formal
gosh,
title.
you can go
In a
so
republic
many,
founded
there's
on
so many
commerce,
things
there
in
could
this
hardly
game
Being
that
such good friends,
another big one
we elected
that we
to
can talk
increase that
about
portion
and
share the
is
benefits.
it's a similar theme, very similar lines to Joshua, but it has to do with Clive. And you get this really beautiful scene after you encounter Barnabas after you actually fight Barnabas. Like you as the player actually fight him, but it's like their second encounter, like their second time actually fighting him after the sea splits, which, if we're gonna keep going biblical, like that's something in itself. But and then it's Clive and Jill, like they're very Adam and Eve on the beach, if you know what I'm saying. Like but it's a beautiful scene. Not because of that. Do not take me out of context. Not because of that, okay? But because of the conversation that happens. Because what happens is, and what happens at the end of the scene is, Jill gives up her dominant powers or he gives her the blessing of Shiva. I'm sorry, gives Clive, like, her powers, basically. And... if you recall, and I especially, like, you really feel this with how I felt. I really felt it with Dion, but whenever like Clive takes on like these powers, he like you can tell he's like struggling, right? It's painful for him, and he mentions during that scene like, I feel like I'm taking on the burdens of like all these people. And that right there is Matthew 11:28, which is Jesus saying, come to me, all of you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. And in a sense, Clive taking on the burdens of, having all these powers, he's literally seeing like the memories and the like moments, minutes, hours before, like after they happen, right? The whole thing with Dion in the antechamber, right? Whenever you find out like why he went mad, it's because he tried to kill Olivier, who was just a puppet for Ultima at the end of the day, and accidentally accidentally killed his father because his father jumped in the way, and that's what made him go mad. And Clive felt that.
Yeah.
He felt that pain. It's the same thing with Benedicta, with her, like, and honestly, like, Benedicta is way deeper than people like give her credit for, because she she is someone who, and this is like when you really look at her, she's somebody who like I feel like did not know herself because she was somebody who was so, kind of just like, she had like 3 different dudes, right? Like Sid, Hugo,
Was she the
Barnabas.
whore of Babylon, Andy? Is that what you're trying to
Right.
say?
I mean, I wasn't going to go there, but what I'm saying is typically people who live that kind of lifestyle are really, really don't know themselves. And they're looking for things to fulfill them in other places that are not going to fulfill them.
And
And
I
that
think
could
a
be,
lot of it, I think
yeah.
a lot of what was going on with Benedicta too was like,
Mhm.
again, one of the big themes in this game is self-preservation, right?
Yeah.
That's everything that
Mhm.
was going on with Ultima. At the end of the day, it was self-preservation for him and his race. And you could argue, same thing could be said for Clive, Joshua, and everybody on the other side of the aisle. It's may all just come down to self-preservation at the end of the day. But with Benedicta, we saw, because they handled it very, very, I would say neatly, but also very quickly. You had to really be paying attention.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
Benedicta,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
see that like she was just this commoner, like like worse than commoner, in rags, like lowest of the low. And Sid was the one who kind of pulled her up out of that, and then she gained these powers of Garuda. We don't know exactly when she awoke into them, but you could see that everything she was doing was about preserving that power, preserving that influence.
Yeah.
There was a time where Sid was good enough for her because Sid was down with the plan, right? They were aligned with everything that Barnabas had going on, bringing all the icons together. That was like originally his vision, right? And then Sid kind of turned his back on that whole plan, starting everything with the hideout and sort of divorcing from that system. And that's when Benedicta had to hop on over to Hugo, Barnabas. She's just looking for who's going to be the winner. And she's putting her eggs in all these different baskets, no pun intended. But like,
right. Yeah.
but she's playing it for who can be the win. But the tragedy of it all was that underneath all that, she did genuinely love Sid. But but the tragedy is she loved her power more. Like, and you see it when she loses the Garuda powers. Like, you see her, she plays
in a
tsundere,
frenzy.
boss bitch for the first, like, 10% of that game. But the second she loses her power, she becomes a pathetic little girl.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. Yep. She doesn't actually know her real worth.
Yeah.
Like, she's trying to find her worth in her powers and these people and influence. She doesn't know her worth. And it's funny that you brought up Sid because that's another one. And that's because that's what Sid does. And you don't just see that with her, but you see that with, if you just talk to the people at the Hideaway, you see that all over the Hideaway. Like I actually just recently started my New Game Plus playthrough, and I'm redoing the I'm going through all the side quests again. But during one of the first side quests, when you're just like playing waiter and just like serving dishes to like to the people, you go up to it's the lame bearer, which is funny that it's this one specifically. And he says like, I really didn't have much, but like, Sid like kind of brought me here and gave me a purpose, and I can actually be free here. And it's like, that's what Sid does. And that's what Jesus does. So like, you see it
I hate
constantly.
to interrupt, but it just came up on the screen. That whole thing where you said that like what Sid is carrying out with the Hideaway can be paralleled with Christ and his story. Do you think that is why he offered Clive the red wine upon his first arrival back at the hideout?
Dude,
sort of like
you know what's funny?
You know what I mean?
That is really funny because I just literally like an hour ago like rewatched that scene, and I'm like, I wonder if there's like anything there. I wasn't really like playing around with it too much, but I was like, that's
He's
interesting.
welcoming Clive to the church, man. Welcome to
welcome
to the Hideaway.
That's what the Hideaway is. It's literally like it's what it should be, right? I mean, what I would like the church in 2023 to become, right? It's just this solid, like
unified community,
right? The Hideaway is like the church, right? And Sid is like, and you know what's funny too is, because there's very much a lot. You see parallels of Jesus and Clive, right? And especially with again Clive taking on the burdens of the world, Jesus taking on the burden of sin on the cross. Parallel, But I just thought of this now. You could also say that Clive is kind of like Peter in a way. What I mean, not in like deny Jesus 3 times, Peter. No. I'm talking like after that. I'm talking like before all that happens, Jesus says, on this rock, I'm going to build my church, right? And he's talking to Peter. And so what happens? Well, Sid dies. And who takes over the Hideaway? Clive does. Clive becomes the new Sid. Not that Peter does not, don't hear me out, Peter does not become the new Jesus, right? But Jesus said, hey, the things that I've done, if you believe in me and you have my Holy Spirit, you can do them and greater things, right? So, and that's essentially what Clive did. Like, he went to fulfill Sid's mission. Another parallel, right? Yep. Okay, Jesus has the Great Commission, go and make disciples of all nations. Sid has this vision of like, I want to destroy these crystals because they're destroying the world, essentially. And
well, he saw it for like
it's Clive fulfilling Sid's mission, right? And it goes back to like whenever Yoshi P in that interview that we talked about in the last podcast we did, where it was like, well, at some point Clive is going to put away this quest for vengeance and he's going to live for he's going to walk with a much greater purpose and a much greater mission in mind. And I believe that there's multiple sides to that where like, it is fulfilling Sid's wishes, but also to see bearers free, which is also fulfilling Sid's wishes, but also to just bear the burdens of all of these people, because when you're bearing that much weight, you don't have time or room in your mind to even entertain the thoughts of vengeance, because there's already like that's already heavy enough. So Sid's another one.
Let me throw something else into the Sid pile.
Throw it in there.
So are you familiar with the Faustian deal?
What is it?
The Faustian deal?
I don't think so.
So that's where the term like deal with the devil comes from, where in a sense it's like you give up something of importance in order for some like safety and security from the devil. The devil grants you something that gives you an advantage you've been seeking. It's like unearned wisdom, unearned power, a Faustian deal in a sense. So I think a big thing with Sid is he kind of realized the world was stuck in this Faustian deal. He didn't know it for sure, like the specifics, although he did know who Ultima was. That's why I think when Ultima first appears, he's like, now you show yourself, or he says something along those lines. But they make it known that Sid knows who Ultima is to a degree. Yeah. So to me, I think a big thing with Sid was kind of recognizing, hey, we got this raw deal. We think we're getting something amazing with these crystals and this magic, but all it's doing is holding us back from our full potential. We're becoming reliant on something that is unnatural to us, that if you remove that element, we're almost helpless. That's why at the Hideaway, what were they doing? They were growing fruit without magic. They were already starting to bring forth this world that wasn't reliant on this Faustian deal.
Yes. There is a world that is possible and a life that is possible to live without letting the influences of the world consume you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's true for today as well. I believe that as well for today.
Oh, these are a lot of what we're talking are eternal truths. Like a lot of what we're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
That's why they show up in stories constantly, because no matter what you do, if you put these things in a story, it just resonates. It's almost like magic, Yeah. It just magically resonates with people. So you've covered Sid. Was there anything else from your end that really stood out to you?
A little bit. I kind of want to talk about Barnabas a little bit.
We could talk about Barney.
Yeah, Barnabas is very interesting in the sense where like the way that I can describe him. And I so want to just do a deep dive on this character. Like my second playthrough, I'm gonna just like do a deep dive on him. But he's kind of like a radical Christian that is serving the complete like wrong God, like the complete demonic. Like and it's funny because he uses, and this I don't like. There's probably deeper things to this, but what really just stuck out to me, because I've never heard this from like a video game before, but he uses like the same Christian lingo, right? That I use and that people in like in my community use, around here of like, oh, I serve the Lord, right? You know, we are doing this for the will of God. And it's like, buddy, like, I love what you're saying, but I hate what you're saying because you're serving the wrong God, my guy. Like, and so it's funny. It's like, he's kind of like a radical, and I don't know if this is even the best way to put it, but like a radical Christian who's not serving Christ, who's serving this like false idea of a god. And Ultima, you know, Ultima actually is like a god in this game, but he's not like, you know, he's very
he's a false
he's
god.
evil.
He's a false god. Like he's something that is, I guess what you would say, physically superior to mankind,
Yes.
right? Like if you pinned
I
Ultima
would
up
say
against, go ahead.
you know who I would actually compare Ultima more to, like the Antichrist in a sense. Right? And that's what the book of Revelation goes into, where like there will be an Antichrist who comes and deceives many, and that's exactly what Ultima does. He definitely did it to Barnabas. Barnabas has this influence, so he's able to deceive an entire nation because of the influence Barnabas has. And so, and what does he do? He does it. Barnabas and all the other dominants, every dominant in this game is just a means to an end for Ultima. All of them. Because Ultima just wants Clive to absorb them all into him, and then Ultima just wants to take Clive over. And so, yeah, Barnabas is really interesting. I want to do a deeper dive on him at some point, but yeah, it's just like kind of funny, like the whole, just the language that he uses it's very Christian, but he's himself a very like not Christian, right? It's like he uses the same language, but he's serving an evil god.
So just to put it bluntly, he's got the temperament of a Christian, but he's a Satanist.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the best way to describe it. Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Part of what makes him so creepy too, which is one of the things that made him like really hit with me, and why like I love it when a game can really get me behind wanting to fight somebody. You know, like when a game can build you up to where like, I want to fight this person. I want to get the better of them. They achieved that with Barnabas, and I think part of what irked me so much was that once you figure out what's going on with him and Ultima and all that, you're just like, dude, you have hollowed yourself out to a demon. You know, like again, you're capable of greatness. You know, you're an icon. You're capable of greatness. I believe
he's a king.
He's a king.
Dude. Like, yeah.
And he's kneeling before this fallen demon who, in a sense, like tempts him. You know what I mean? Like you have that scene where where Ultima's morphed into Benedicta to sexually tempt Barnabas. Again, falling for lust like that. Then you have when he forms into the mother and everything, you know, we've learned about the mother is like, it's just like, it's just, it's crazy when someone can be painted so, because I see him a little bit as a victim. He's not a victim as a whole.
Me too.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I see it where it's like, he thinks what he's doing is right.
Yes.
You know
and that is where the most terrifying of villains come from.
That's why he was so unsettling.
Stories like this. Yes. And that's why I love him as a villain, because he does think what he is doing is right. That's what makes him one of the better antagonists in the game. And it's also like where, side note, but like one of my favorite lines in the game comes from their final encounter where Barnabas says, "Show me the strength of your will." And it's like, and Clive says, "It's not the strength of my will you have to worry about, it's the weakness of yours." And that's a baller line, because when you think about it, like Barnabas, he thinks he has a strong will, but he doesn't, because he's given into the likes of someone like Ultima, who's purely deceptive.
But you see, to Barnabas, he's so twisted. He almost sees he almost sees it like inversely, like, oh, you don't even have the will to submit to Ultima. You don't have that will. You're so self-preserving. You're so whereas I am willing to give myself.
Yeah,
you know
but where the will is stronger is that will in Clive saying, no, like, I'm not going to submit to that. You know, that's the Ifrit in him. Ifrit has always been the rebellious one in
Yep.
every Final Fantasy game. And again, those characteristics in the dominance of the icons, they show
come
and
forth.
they shine throughout the entire game.
Yeah, dude. It's
Yeah.
he's definitely the most unsettling. I think of all the like quote unquote antagonists, and I'm not gonna put Dion in that category, even though we do battle with him.
Yeah, I
Just
don't
'cause
know. I don't.
He ends up
I
on
don't
our
see
side
him.
by the end.
Yeah,
But
Dion was 100% a victim. 100%.
Oh, dude. And like we could do a whole
yeah.
podcast on Dion. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
We could do a whole Dion, the one about Dion. We could go in.
Yeah.
He really is, and I firmly believe this. He really is one of the best written Final Fantasy characters ever.
Dion.
Dion, because you feel it. You feel it. You feel it when he gets the news that Olivier is gonna be king. Anyway, it's just he's just so good. But
yeah.
Dude, yeah, of all the antagonists, though, it's tough for me to pick between Barnabas and Hugo. Because Hugo, I don't want to get too into it. It's like, yeah, Hugo's a villain, but in the sense that, like, what is he, right? So he's like this lead economic advisor, but he's also like the strongest military force that his nation has. Like, he has it all. The riches, the money, the political power, the physical power. But like, what did he want?
What did he want most?
He wanted love.
Yeah.
You know,
and when that was taken away from him, it broke him.
When just the prospect of it being taken away from him, and like the worst part of it is like
not just taken away from him, but shoved in his face.
Yeah.
Whenever what is presumed, they bring the head of Benedicta.
Yeah.
To him, you know. Oh. And what's even worse is when you find out, because I don't know how much Hugo knew about Sid and Benedicta, but whenever they tell him, oh, it was Sid who did this, right? And then when you know the history, it's like, oh, that, like, talk about, like, getting you wound up. Like, dude, like, and then he goes on a quest of vengeance for the next 5 years or so? Like, just looking for Sid, when Sid's not even alive, technically. So, like, imagine how he felt when, like, the person that,
he was living in a delusion. Like, that's the ultimate, like, tragedy. Is like, his perception of the world wasn't real. Like, Benedicta didn't really love him. She was using him. That was quite clear. Any feelings she really had were still with Sid. You know?
Yeah, and that's a lot of, like, these antagonists. They're living in a delusion. Like, Barnabas, like, straight as a T. I don't even have to explain that one. But, like, yeah. And it's really... it's really easy to pinpoint that, like, you know, I believe every single one of those dominants were victimized in some way, shape, or form.
In some way.
Regardless of how malicious or I just awful they were, right? I can't really think of the word, but like
malevolent may be the word.
Malevolent's a good word, yeah.
Yeah.
They were all victims to some degree. And
slaves of fate, as Sid would call it.
Right. All being puppeteered by this force. Like, you know how Final Fantasy is, there's always that force in the background that's puppeteering the whole thing, right? The real antagonist of the game. And that's, I mean, my gosh, like I even see that today with just people of like, there are people who will lash out at other people, but it's because they've been hurt so bad, you know?
Eternal truths, Andy.
Yeah.
Ancient
hurt
wisdom.
people, hurt people, hurt people.
Hurt people.
Hurt people, hurt people. You see that all throughout this game. Yeah. Cool. So I think that's my side of the pond. I'm trying to think of anything else.
More is gonna. I guarantee you, more is gonna pop up because again, I wanted to talk a little bit. And when I get into like Greco-Roman, Mythos, Logos, Ultima, everything with Logos and Christ in the Bible, we'll be able to spin on that. But
for sure,
I do first and foremost want to talk about the union concepts in this game that were put on display. And by union, I'm talking Carl Jung. It's like basically, I don't know if Carl Jung just influenced all of stories after he did his work and research, or
Right.
if he really unlocked these subconscious truths that just can't help but come to the surface in all of these stories, in people's writings, in art. Because again, everything he was able to recognize from the past has just completely perpetuated into the future. And again, like for some people who maybe have played Persona uses a lot of these concepts. For anyone who watched our last episode with Aqua, we talked about how Aqua being in the realm of darkness and being confronted with that mirror image of herself that sort of mocked her. That's where these concepts come from. But anyway, going with the union concepts, this entire game breaks down to the unionization of polar forces, right? Which in union concepts is the ego and the shadow. But in FF16, if you want to take that all the way to the backdrop, it's an argument between determinism and fate. And a little shout out to Max Durat. He does a good video on this. It's worth checking out. But it's something Final Fantasy has done before. Like, you've played Final Fantasy IX, right?
Yes.
That whole game is determinism and fate. Do you have free will or not? I guess that's actually what I mean. Determinism and free will. Like, are you just a slave to fate, or are your actions actually yours? Were you able to conjure up some individual influence on that, or are you just the consequence of your parents, your genetics, the things that happen to you? This game is a big practice, and I think it looks at it pretty honestly, because I actually think, you know, a lot of people are split on whether or not Clive survived at the end, and I think whatever you believe dictates whether you believe in determinism or free will. I almost feel like it's this litmus test, and that's why they left it sort of open-ended, because if you believe in the like unbreakable human will, you're the kind of person that's going, nah, Clive's getting back to the hideout. Yes, his hand is petrified. Yes, he's worn out from the fight. But that man has an unbreakable will, like you were talking about with Barnabas in that confrontation, where they kind of brought up the idea.
So would that be the determinism? Like,
determinism would be that
mindset.
Determinism mindset would be that his fate was determined. He didn't have any free will. But to me, I think this concept, and this is why I think he survived, because I think the game's message is in the direction of free will. I think it argues both sides.
100%. 100%. Like, the whole game is like, dude, the whole theme of this game was the legacy of the crystals has shaped our history for long enough. We've been following a script with these crystals.
Yes.
Yeah. But now, no, it's time for free will to step in and take over.
And then you consider, like, this is part of what actually makes the ending so, like, bone chilling, is you find out, oh, you did everything Ultima wanted you to do. Sid's great idea to destroy the crystals wasn't even his idea.
It's exactly what Ultima wanted.
It was all determinism until the moment Ultima tried to jack Clive's free will, where he had the power to say no. That is the only thing.
That's so interesting.
Only moment where free will actually comes through, but it came through in like the most primal, important part of the game, was him saying no to being Ultima's vessel. He may have followed that script, did everything Ultima wanted him to do, but when he got to a certain point, the free will triumphed. And again, this is why I'm inclined to believe he survived at the end, but we'll see. I'm sure they'll make an official statement eventually, or there'll be some DLC, or who knows, we might even get an FF16 too. Anything further on the whole free will and determinism thing before I maybe move into the like shadow work?
I mean, honestly, like, I mean, you see it throughout the whole game, even like the message of the game, even like what the trailers were even building up. You see it with, I mean, gosh, like, you see it with Jill a little bit. Like, you definitely see it with, like...
Oh, with Jill, dude, with Jill, it's so on the nose, right? Because she was taken in and basically enslaved, right? Held against her will. And then it's almost like she was held captive by her free will, because they threatened to, like, kill the children, right? If she didn't do as they said. So it's like, of her own free will, she chose to slaughter those people so that the children could live. And it's just like they
Yeah.
almost made her a
Right.
slave to that.
She didn't have to. Right. She didn't have to, but the children would have died. So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah. No, that's really interesting. Yeah.
And
There's
how does she lash out? How does because her I guess the overall point there is like, hey, I was kind of a slave to this determinism that the Iron Kingdom was imposing on me. I had to do everything they said, slaughter who they said to slaughter, freeze who they said to freeze. If I had a free will, I would have killed that bastard on the spot. And I think that's why she says, Clive, if I'm going to do this with you, I have to go back and do right by my free will.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't doing right by it the whole time I was captured. So with Jill, it's very on the nose. With Sid, it's on the nose too. It's you know, every character at a certain point does what they believe is their best to divert from the determinism and into a space of free will. Whether a character gets there or not is relatively up for debate. Because again, consider like what Sid thought was breaking free was actually Ultima's trap, but in a sort of paradoxical sense. And we'll get into paradoxes in a bit too. It's almost like Sid was in this perfect place where like his free will and determinism were actually the same thing. You know?
Yeah, you wanna kind of expand on that? So yeah.
Perfect. So Ultima's determinism was, hey, you're gonna destroy all these crystals. That's exactly what I want. But in your head, you're thinking that's what's gonna set you and your kind free. Both were true. That is what set mankind free. But it was also what Ultima was doing to enslave the race, like the all of Valisthea even further. You know?
Yeah.
To again revive his kind.
I can't help but always think back, because we were talking about FF15 a lot in the last podcast.
Yes.
But I can't help but always think back to this whole like dude with Arden and Noctis, right? And I mean, I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about FF15 spoilers here.
Yeah. Dude, honestly, and this is just my rule of thumb, it's like,
sure,
if a game's been out for a year, if you cared that much, you probably know. So you're good. So you're good.
Yeah. So big Final Fantasy 15 spoilers, by the way. But the whole, and you find this out in episode Arden, if you play the DLC, that basically Arden gets screwed over by Bahamut and is like, dude, your role for the rest of your life is to wait for the chosen king. I need to make a video on FF15, I swear. to wait for the chosen king to arise so that he can kill you, basically. And
set you free.
Yeah. And then, but it's funny because it's like, yeah, Arden loses, but he also gets exactly what he wants. Wins. Right. You know?
Right.
Because that's, you know, that was determined, and it's like what happens in the, you know, alternate episode Ignis ending aside, like what happens is like Noctis gives his life to destroy Arden because Noctis is the one true king. And Arden, although he's dead, you know, he lost, he also got exactly what he wanted because he hated the Lucian bloodline, right? And you seek, it's kind of similar with like, again, that whole like Arden of like, you know, kind of like, although the protagonists are doing all these things to try to stop, you know, Ultima, to stop Arden, they're also doing exactly what they want them to do. And I think those are some of the most brilliantly like written villains in just stories. Whenever you can weave, like when you can weave in what you were saying, that mesh of like determinism and free will, and it's kind of like all one thing when you look at it.
The unionization of polar forces, and like that's it's just what so much of this game comes down to. I really want to get into Clive and the shadow work, but since we're here, like think about you have to wonder, right? Like, why did Ifrit and Phoenix need to fuse? Why?
Right.
The unionization of polar forces. You were talking about this earlier.
Flames of destruction, flames of resurrection.
Exactly. The unionization of polar forces, which so with Clive, and again, we talked about this a little in my last episode with Aqua. So the whole idea of integrating the shadow. So think of yourselves, and again, human beings are fractured in many different ways, but try to conceptualize it like this. Picture your brain. At the front of your brain is the ego. These are all the things that you have made conscious. So like in your example, Andy, it would be, I'm a Christian and my job is X, and I am a brother, and I am a son, and I am compassionate, and I'm, all these things that you bring forth into your consciousness, right? Which is another big topic in this game too, is threads of consciousness and how they work. Again, you and I are friends. That's a thread of consciousness right there. So that's everything we bring up here. But just like that's here, conscious, we're aware of it, we identify as these certain things. Behind us, there's this subconscious. And Carl Jung had this quote of like, until you integrate your shadow and make yourself aware of the unconscious, you are doomed to have it control your life, and you'll just call it fate. I'm paraphrasing, but he says it along those lines. So from a Christian perspective, what's lingering here in the subconscious? That's the lust. That's the pride. That's the gluttony, it's the sloth. It's all the things that are part of you that you.
It's the desires of the flesh. It's the desires of the flesh. Yep.
I wouldn't go further to maybe be like the things that call forth materialistic desires, because it's the same thing that makes you love money, or it's the same thing that makes you love like fast food and stuff. Like all the things that are a part of you that you shove away, that you don't want to think about. Yeah. And it could be anything. Everybody's
It's funny you mention that, because there's a Bible verse that talks about, I think it's in 1st or 2nd Corinthians, that says, or maybe Colossians, take every thought captive, right? Because I think even Paul talks about in the New Testament, and I can't remember if it's in Romans or where it's at, but he talks about, he's like, I don't even trust my own self, which is why I discipline my flesh and my body so that I can serve the Lord and show myself approved, right? So that I can, so it's and it's hard to do. It is, because like whenever that's those subconscious, like materialistic leaning desires move and shift into this realm of consciousness, that can lead you down a very dangerous road.
It's painful. It's the process of what Jung called becoming the self. So like in Christianity, Christ is the self. He is the ego with the integrated shadow. He called that unconscious forth in, confronting the devil in the desert, and he was able to face it without it tempting him. He was able to face it without it controlling him. That's becoming the self, which was seen as like not the highest form of being per se, but it's sort of what is considered to be like the most elevated consciousness. Because if you're living in a world where you're not aware of this unconscious behind you, you're not aware of this shadow, like I was saying before, what he gets into is, well, then it's just going to control your life, and you're not going to have any idea why what's happening to you is happening to you. You're just going to think you have bad luck, right? So we see this, and I want to get into it a little bit more because I'm such a nerd. I could talk about it all day.
Go for it.
But we see it with Clive during the "You're not Ifrit, I am" scene.
Yeah, the whole like fighting his internal shadow.
Infernal shadow. Yeah. That's the name of it. Infernal shadow. And what is he doing? He's confronting the part of him that has the capacity for destruction, that has the capacity for darkness, right? And that's a very tough thing to get a hold of. But what is the truth? And I want to talk about truth a lot too, because I think some more ancient wisdom, something that you see a lot you see it in ancient Egypt, this idea with Horus diving into the underworld to essentially rescue his father. You see this, yeah, dude. Yeah, and where does he go? Where does he go? He goes to Phoenix Gate, right? Doesn't he have to go under Phoenix Gate to where he faces off against Infernal Shadow?
I think so, actually. Funny enough. Yeah, I gotta confirm that, but that's wild.
Happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, if we're talking hero's journey terms, that's the belly of the whale, right?
Yeah.
So oh god, gotta regain. You're
good. Infernal Shadow.
Right. Okay. So that was the moment where he combined in order to call forth your highest potential. I think this is a good way to put it. Your ego has to integrate the shadow. So now the question becomes, why did Clive need to integrate this destructive part of his personality? because it's on him to destroy the Faustian deal, destroy the false god. In order for him to be a hero, he needed that destructive shadow in order to complete Sid's vision, his vision. To be the hero required that destructive part of his personality. And again,
he had to, you know what it comes down to? It comes down to identity. It's literally
who am I?
like, you're not Ifrit, I am. Like, knowing who you are. Or even like, I mean, let's, just a slight caveat to Kingdom Hearts, but like Riku's story in Chain of Memories.
Great example.
Like I cast all my friends aside and then like, I have this darkness, and Naminé's like, well, why don't you just use the darkness and accept it? And he's like, this is my darkness, and he accepts the darkness. Same thing, same exact thing. It's funny because with Jesus and Satan in the desert, a little bit different, at least so in the Christian view, right? We just call that's just the Holy Spirit, right? There's Father, Son, Holy Spirit. That's just the Holy Spirit in Jesus, right? Because Jesus, the whole point of Jesus was like, he's fully God and fully man, but in order to fulfill the prophecies of the Old Testament and fulfill the law and live a perfect life in order to be able to take on our sins so that we can have that forgiveness, he had to cast his divinity aside and live 33 years on planet Earth. As he's fully human and fully God, but he's casting his divinity aside so that he can do everything, live a sinless life, being fully human, but with the Holy Spirit. And that's why he after his ascension, after the 40 days, after his resurrection, he says, now I give you have the Holy Spirit here with you. So, and it's interesting, because we're talking about this whole, again, what is Carl Jung? Yeah, what is like is there like an initial term that Carl Jung uses, or is it just like
he calls it the unconscious?
Okay, so like, it's very interesting because when you, and again, from the Christian worldview, when you accept the fact that you're a sinner, that you're broken, kind of going where we're at with this destructive personality with Clive and his infernal shadow, when you accept that and, not dwell on like just being, like, woe is me, right? But like, when you actually accept that, it's like, you know what? Yeah, like, I am this. And, what I went through sucked. What Clive went through with the whole Joshua ordeal at the beginning, that sucks. But you know what? I'm going to use that experience, and I'm going to take that experience to heart, and I'm going to accept that it happened, and I'm going to actually use that to become a better person later on in the story. I'm going to use that, and it brings me, I hate to keep bringing back Kingdom Hearts, but you are a Kingdom Hearts channel. Kingdom Hearts Recoded. The best thing that Kingdom Hearts Recoded does, it talks about hurt, right? It talks about one of the deepest themes in the series is hurt. And there's Data Sora and Data Roxas are having this conversation, and Data Roxas says, well, are you going to hold on to your hurt, or do you actually want to be free of that? Like, you can cast that hurt aside and be free of it. And Sora says, no, I'm going to hold on to this because there's people who need my help. There's people who need my help that if I hold on to this hurt, I can actually be able to relate to them and talk to them. This is coming from a computer program, by the way, right? So, which is wild. I kind of see the same similar things here, because when Clive does get in his 30s, right, he isn't that vengeful 20-year-old anymore, right? He's accepted the truth, I find it hilarious that's an actual game mechanic, accepting the truth. But like, amazing, beautifully done, right? He accepts the truth, and now he takes up the mantle of Sid and is essentially doing what Sid was doing. He's giving these bearers a place to live, to work, a place to be free,
to thrive.
To thrive. He's liberating these people. And I'm really wondering if he did not have that internal conflict with his infernal self, that I don't think he would have been able to live up to that Sid legacy.
Definitely not, because Sid already had that dog in him. You know, when we meet Sid, he's already
Yeah,
integrated
yeah.
the shadow. He's
Yeah,
already
yeah,
there.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Which is why I think
yeah.
like an episode Sid would be so
good.
interesting.
I
Like,
honestly,
dude,
I
like,
think it might be because Sid knew about Ultima, right?
yeah,
I
but we
think
don't
when-
know much more than that.
Just a random prediction. I don't have a
Yeah.
lot to back it up, but I think when Sid clashed with Bahamut and he found that crystal tower, I think that's when he fought Leviathan, and that's when he learned everything.
Right, because they did name drop Leviathan towards the end, right? Which is interesting. And I think, isn't there a theory going around that like the baby that the woman is carrying is like the next dominant of Leviathan?
No, the crystal's
Okay.
gone. No, it can't
Right.
happen.
Okay.
gone.
Okay. Because I've heard that. I was like, that's interesting.
I think it's
but,
more likely that's the next Sid, if anything.
right?
Right?
Yeah. That
would
makes
be
more sense.
likely.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there was something else since we were talking about this accept the truth scene. There's also this idea, this is more Joseph Campbell as opposed to Carl Jung, more hero's journey stuff. But the idea is that like in a hero's story, that which they most need to see is in the place they least want to look. And that's also
That's so true. That is
Yeah.
so. I mean, that's relatable to me on a
Dude,
personal level.
that's
Yeah.
life. I think that's a truth of
Yeah.
life is that
Yeah.
what we all need to see most is hidden in the place we're avoiding, which again brings in this idea of, hey, everything we're shoving back here into the unconscious, places we don't want to look, that's actually the place we need to look the most. And if you look with Clive, it's only after he accepts the truth that he's responsible for his brother's death. It is only after he accepts that his brother reappears.
Yeah.
And that everything starts to fix itself. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Him and Jill you see the romance start to kick up after that a lot because he doesn't have this weight on his shoulder. You see him start to get on at the hideout more. You see everything starts to come together for him after he goes into the belly of the whale, the darkest part.
The place that he needed the most but wanted to avoid the most as well.
And it's
like,
always the same thing. The unionization of two polar opposites. Least want to look, most need
but
to
also
see
like
are the same thing.
Like, think about, like, let's just put ourselves in Clive's shoes for a second. Think about how he probably felt when he was taking that long trek. Because, I mean, we had to walk through quite a few areas before we actually got the Phoenix Gate. Think about, like, how he felt every step he took, getting closer and closer to back to where that tragedy happened. That one thing that he cannot get over, that he cannot forgive himself for. He's going back there. Like, imagine how he felt. And then when he's there, oh my gosh, like, I can't even imagine like what he was feeling. You know?
Well, he went full suicidal. He wanted Sid to kill him.
Yeah.
You know? Once before he truly accepted the truth. He didn't want to accept it so much he was willing to die.
Yes.
You know? But you kind of say that before Clive fulfills the sort of Christ hero archetype, it's filled by Sid, and there's Sid right there pulling someone out of the darkness, you know, with a little bit of humor, like, you're alive, might as well make yourself useful. You know?
You're right. Yeah.
He says he has a line later in the game that cracks me up, that he's basically like, well, Clive, you go learn the truth, and if you find the man who killed your brother, you kill the bastard. If it turned out to be you, well, then you just kill yourself.
Yeah, he does. That's actually, like, I'm pretty sure that's exactly what he says.
Yeah, basically just saying, like, well, dude, you gotta go see the truth. You can't just hide from it and say, hey, kill me because I took one peek in the dark corner and I don't like it. It's like, no, go there, learn what you need to learn, then come back and decide what to do.
You're going through the fire, but not to be burned. Become more refined, right?
Like a blackthorn iron in the fire.
Yeah, there's even a Bible verse. I want to say it's like 1 Peter something. But it kind of talks about that, where like, just as like silver and gold go through the fire and come out more refined, so that we go through the fire, we come out looking more like Jesus. Essentially, is what it's saying. You can go through the fire and you can let it burn you, or you can actually accept that, like, wait a minute, No, I'm not going to let this burn me. This fire actually wants to make me into a better person.
Forge me. Yeah.
Yeah, which is so funny because, again, with Clive going with fighting his infernal shadow, infernal, right? He's literally in the fire being refined in his consciousness.
Yeah.
Like, dude,
Deep,
like,
it's deep stuff.
Yeah, the flames of refinement, as what I like to call it.
And that's the I guess you would say that's the
yeah.
Phoenix's flame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even in, you know what's funny too, now that you mention that, because yeah, he had the blessing of the Phoenix, right? So it's like that, those flames of resurrection were in him, and that doesn't necessarily mean it had to be a physical bodily resurrection, but no, more a resurrection of the mind, right? Yeah, like set your mind on things above, a resurrection of the mind, do not be, the Bible says, do not be conformed by the ways of this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. And that's exactly the journey that Clive went on.
I was going to say, that is par for par, shot for shot, exactly what transpired with that whole Ifrit sequence. I want to talk about Mythos logos. Also, chat, I'm going to read the chats. I know we're over the 1 hour mark, but it's a chunky episode. We got a chunky episode.
We chunking.
We got a few more chunking. Episode 158, we chunking. 185, excuse me, my dyslexia kicked in. 185, we chunking. But before we talk Mythos, Logos, and Ultima, there was something else I wanted to talk to you about, hopping back to Christian symbolism before we maybe move into Mythos, Logos. So this whole idea of Joshua, the Phoenix, and that really being like a stand-in for the Christ archetype. You know, something that isn't often talked about is that, archetypically speaking, like, Christ is the Phoenix. Like, what do you think Ash Wednesday is? Ash Wednesday, you go and you get ashes in the shape of the cross on your forehead, you know?
You're right.
He is the Phoenix.
Yeah, he holds the keys to sin and death, right? A place, you know, where people burn eternally. You know, if this is what I believe as a Christian, don't accept Jesus, like that, you know, there's heaven and hell, right? And so, like, he holds the keys, right? And that's why we need a savior, right? That's why I believe we need to believe in Jesus because of that. And so, again, he dies on the cross, you know, and the Bible says he descended to the lowest regions of the earth,
belly of the
right?
whale.
Right. Conquered sin and death, and what happens 3 days later? He's back up again. He's, absolutely the Phoenix. Absolutely.
Didn't Christ revive someone on his way up?
Yeah. So
Lazarus?
before it's before the crucifixion.
Gotcha.
But yeah. There's a couple people. Lazarus is the most popular one. There's an instance where a man named Jairus, his daughter, gets so sick that she dies, and then he says, like, and then he goes and he basically picks her up and she's awake, because that's just Jesus. That's what he does.
He's using a Phoenix down.
Yeah, you just see a Phoenix down. But honestly, with Lazarus, and this is so interesting. So in Jewish culture, what they believe, I don't know if it's the culture of the Jews or if it was the culture of kind of like that region. I think it's definitely a Jewish thing. But like, so what they believed was, if you're dead, whenever you die, if you're dead for like 2-3 days, they still believe that your soul kind of like hovered around your body. Like, maybe you can still, like, you know, maybe something can happen. Maybe you're not really gone. And that's kind of where
you're waiting for the bus to heaven.
Yeah, and that's kind of, we were talking about this in the pre-roll a little bit, but a practice in Catholicism is when you go to a funeral, you might see people pray at the casket, because, you know, they're interceding for the soul, right, after they pass. However, in Jewish culture, if you are dead for 4 days or more, they just believe, okay, there's no coming back. And here's what's so profound about Lazarus being raised from the dead. Jesus specifically, it makes note of this so that you know. that he is the Son of God. He specifically waits not 1, not 2 days, not 3 days. He waits 4 days specifically, and the Bible makes note of that before he goes. And then everybody's like, "You could have saved him. Where have you been? He's been dead for 4 days." And then he says, "Lazarus, come out." Boom. And it's like, yes. So, Phoenix. Right. I know I went off on a little tangent, but
no, you were explaining the archetype of the Phoenix of how Christ didn't just have this power for himself, this death and rebirth power. These Phoenix Downs he had embedded within the Holy Spirit was something that he was able to use, again, not just for his own resurrection, but as we saw, resurrection of others.
Yes.
Excuse me. But let's cook on some mythos and logos.
Okay.
You know, I think these are some ideas that have been around for a very long time. You know, Carl Jung and like Greco-Roman culture had their take on this, and Christianity has their take on this. They're saying mostly the same thing, but they're coming from different perspectives, right? Whereas maybe like Carl Jung kind of talked about these sort of broadly, whereas Christianity acted it out through the in the life of Christ. Like it's something that occurred and is to be observed, whereas like with Carl Jung it's something that is taught or is like you get the point. Anyway, let's talk about logos and mythos. So typically speaking, mythos, again, we were talking about, if everyone wants to go back to that imagery of the front of the brain, back of the brain, conscious and unconscious. So mythos and logos. Mythos would actually be embodied by the unconscious, right? These are sort of the animalistic impulses, one would say, you know, maybe some more emotional reactionary, right? You think reactionary when you think mythos. And the reason why, and again, this goes into the determinism and free will argument. Again, Ultima is constantly referring to Clive as the mythos, right?
Yes.
It's unconscious, because he's almost mocking him, like, you don't know what you're doing. You're pulled by fate. You're doing everything
until the very end,
when he
refers to him as logos. It's so good. It's so good
logos,
because
just to explain what it is, the logos is like rational thinking objectively, being proactive, not reactive, not being pulled around by impulses and emotion, right? So for the whole game, he's referring to Clive as mythos, but then once that free will kicks in, he goes, "Oh, you're the logos." What has Clive done? He's become the self, where the logos and mythos have become one, you know, in standing in opposition to Ultima. So,
you know, it's funny. I don't know if you know this, but so John 1:1, right? John 1:1 says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Word is capitalized in the English. In the Greek, that word, like the word as it's referring to the Word of God, right, translates exactly to logos. So like whenever like people were talking about like, oh, Jesus being the logos, he's the Word, right? And it's, you know, believe what you want, right? You know, but I believe that the logos, rational.
The logos
word,
is that which calls forth the truth. You know, truth is a big part of this game. And again, it's that which calls forth the truth. And human beings, whereas, you know, Christ was the logos, right? He's this embodiment of the logos, because that sort of unconscious mythos didn't have any power over him. You know what I mean? That wasn't something that's as strong within him as it is us. We, as you know, standard humans, let's just say, for lack of a better term, we are much more subject to emotional impulses, reactionary impulses, irrational impulses, you know, whereas this logo, something that is to strive towards, is something that transcends all of that, you know?
So logos, that whenever Ultima finally, during that final battle, refers to them as logos, I'm like, bruh, like
if there was ever any doubt, right?
Right. Yeah. It was just really cool. And again, this will go over like a lot of people's heads initially, but like, again, when you dive into what like all the themes and all of like the archetypes that this story is dealing with, oh man,
it's
like
heavy.
You will go on your own spiritual journey, like to be honest, like, it is powerful because, you know, Ultima has seen Clive as Mythos, and it wasn't just Ultima. It was, um, oh, I'm forgetting Sleipnir. I don't remember his original name, but yeah, that guy, right? The right hand
Barnabas is number
man
2.
of Barnabas is number 2. Also referred to him as Mythos. I think Barnabas even calls him Mythos as well. Yeah. So it's like they see him as, well, you're just this animalistic, like, just ball of flesh that's just another person, who's acting on their desires. But then whenever Clive, like, finally, like, when that free will steps in, right? Because there's this massive battle of consciousness throughout the entire game. Ultima is talking about how, we have to, consciousness. Ugh. We need to do something about that,
If I may,
like, yeah.
it's just something that's interesting. You notice that with Ultima, consciousness to him is this like collectivism, right? You see it when his species wakes up, and there's not just like 8 Ultimas. No, they become this one. They're this collective. Whereas the humans of Valisthea have more individualistic consciousness, and Ultima.
It's funny because
Go.
It's 2 different images of unity.
Yes.
Like collective unity in the sense of like it's one person, right? And one person dictating everything. A hive mind. Yeah. And then there is the unity where, like we were saying before, of people brought together, right? Which is always going to be much stronger, right? Because
that's the Guardians for Xehanort, dude, all over again.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It is. And yeah, just like that moment when he sees him as Logos, right? He addresses him as Logos. It's kind of
hold up. We lost you for a sec. You're back.
Oh, we're good? Am I back?
We lost you. You were going, he kind of, and then you cut.
Okay, am I good?
You're good now. Yeah, you're groovy.
Okay, awesome.
Gravy.
So, it kind of reminds me of, or like the demons in the New Testament. Whenever you will read stories of people being like demon possessed that Jesus heals. The demons recognize Jesus as the Logos. They recognize him and they address him. They even say at one point, it's not, wait, you can't, like, they're terrified of him because the book of Revelation talks about there's an appointed time where all of these demons and all of this, they'll be thrown into a lake of fire, right? And then heaven, a new earth, like, and the demons even say, it's not the appointed time. Like, it's not the appointed time. Like, what are you gonna do to me? And then he does is
deterministic.
Right. He exercises them, but they're not destroyed because they're saying like they know the ending. It's not the appointed time. They recognize him as the Logos, right? Ultima recognizes Clive as the Logos now, and is, when you look in Ultima's eyes, guess what? He's terrified. This God figure is terrified of this. Like, honestly, like I look at it as like the equivalent of what I believe demons and devils or whatever being terrified by people on earth who are filled with the Holy Spirit, because that's what Jesus was, right? He's fully God, but he's also fully man. And like we said before, Cass is
of polarizing forces.
Yes. So and I wouldn't say like Jesus and the Holy Spirit are not polarizing, but it's the same concept of like Jesus was filled with the Spirit and demons were terrified of him. Just as like now he gives the Holy Spirit to us and darkness flees when the Spirit is in the room. I hate to go, I don't want to say I hate to go. I don't mean to go Pentecostal or anything, but like that's just how it is, and just by experience of what I believe and things like that. And so, and that, like that, I mean, that gives me adrenaline in the morning of like, wow, like I can I can be just like that. I can't do it perfectly. Nobody can. But like, everybody's got that dog in him. At the end of the day, honestly, like if Clive's journey has shown us anything, is when you accept like reality, and when you accept your reality, and whether like the good, the bad,
and call forth the logos.
Yes, you are going to be unstoppable.
Yeah,
there's nothing stopping you.
You become the self.
Yeah, and nothing can hold you, and you see that. Honestly throughout the whole game. When Bahamut is about to smite Joshua and Jill, I'm a shield of Rosaria, and I'm gonna do my duty. Bam! Right? Like, dude, nothing. And he walked with such confidence, was not shaken or anything. He walked like with such confidence and just transformed at the perfect time, because he is an unstoppable force, because he knows who he is. He's accepted the truth. He knows who he is. And when you find people like that in the world, there's nothing that can stop them from doing what they want to do.
Well, yeah, dude. I think this is why, Yoon, as a psychologist, was so drawn to this idea. Because, like, well, how do you fix broken people? And his conclusion, and I'm not going to go out and say he's right, it's not my field of expertise, but his conclusion was everything you were saying of, like, if you can get people in whatever template they believe in, to integrate this shadow and call forth this logos, right? From a Christian perspective, it would be integrate the call forth Christ and the Holy Spirit and integrate the temptations of sin.
Right.
If you can. And that's not to say you give in to those sins.
Yeah, take your thoughts captive, right?
Right.
You call upon the Holy Spirit, and you accept that you can't do this on your own, right? That's the Christian perspective of that. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. And I think, it's, again, I have to wonder, like, again, with these concepts, so this is why I called it this episode the ancient wisdom of Final Fantasy 16, because look, if you're a guest on this podcast or you listen to this podcast, there's obviously something about stories that pulls you in.
Yeah.
There's something about stories that leads you either to self-discovery or maybe is some sort of enlightenment. Not to say you play Final Fantasy 16, now you're a Buddhist monk. It's not what I'm getting at.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's that rare 0.01%.
Right.
Right. But yeah.
But it's made me wonder lately if this idea we've talked a lot about today, this unionization of polar forces, it just makes me wonder, like, is that like the ultimate language? Is that the ultimate lesson of lesson? Does every lesson almost come down to this? Because I think about all these symbols that have transcended time. Think of the yin and yang, right? Yeah. Think of the yin and yang. You have the fish of light and the fish of darkness, just to put it in one way. You know what I mean? But what's embedded in that fish of light? Little bit of darkness. And what's embedded in that fish of darkness?
A little bit of light.
A little bit of light. You think of the caduceus. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It was like Hermes' rod. It's used as a lot of medicinal logos now. It's like a staff with the two serpents entwining around it.
You want to know where they really got that from? That's
Moses. That's Moses's staff. Yeah, exactly.
They got that from the bronze serpent in the Old Testament. So there's at one point, I can't remember exactly where it is in the Old Testament. I want to say it's like the Pentateuch, so like the first 5 books of the Old Testament. It's one of those. But there are people who are sick, and what they do is, if you, or it represents, it's after Moses, so representing the staff of Moses, they create this these snakes, these bronze snakes, and they put them on this staff, and they put it up, and they say, if you just look upon this, you'll be healed. And that's exactly what happens. They're healed of their sickness. So that's where they actually get that from. And you see that
a step further. I want to
take
it just one step further, where I'm like, I think this is bigger than that. I think it's just sort of this universal truth that continues to just be called forth, because like the caduceus, like that symbol goes back to like there's like in 2000 BC. There's things referencing it in like ancient Greece in like
That's wild.
in like 500 BC in ancient Greece, like you had Hermes with the rod. It wasn't quite the symbol we know as it today. I think from things like the bronze serpent, it has a more refined image that we know of it today.
Sure.
But I think it's one of those things, and the reason why it may be in the Bible is because it's just one of these truths that continues to just be called forth to us. You know?
It's funny because we're talking about, this is another prophecy of Christ, because you'll see it today. You'll see it if you go to like a hospital or you see an ambulance. You'll see that symbol, because healing, that's what they do. That's where it comes from, right? It's another prophecy of Christ, because the devil is representative as a snake, and Jesus on the cross, right? The snake wraps around the pole, and Jesus on the cross, what happens? Oh, he takes the sin. And when you gaze upon the cross, you are healed and you can be born again. That is another, again, one of hundreds and hundreds of prophecies of Jesus in the Bible. The bronze serpent and the pole, and Jesus on the cross.
And you see again,
it doesn't end.
The cross is another one of these symbols.
Yeah.
Like the yin yang, like the caduceus, that are just so eternal. That all keep bringing us back to the same idea. And to see it like called forth in FF16 in all these different ways, it's just, I don't know. It's like symbolism is always a big part of a Final Fantasy game, like always. But it just seemed like FF16 just
it's heavy in this game.
Ramped it up. Dude.
Oh, for sure.
Like you even see like just to score more points in the Christianity column. Like you even see in Joshua when he's a kid. I'll pull up a scene so people can get a visual. Let me see here. Where you at, little man? Where you at, little man? There he is. He's got crosses on his shirt.
Yeah.
They're right there. It's right there.
Yep.
It's right in front of you.
Oh,
you know?
yeah. Yep.
Hiding in plain sight, as they say.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's wild. I'm kind of curious to count. I see 2. I'm kind of curious to see like how many are on there.
There's another one. Let me really pull this forward. I gotta switch.
For sure.
On the throne, the Rosaria throne. We can see it in the scene where Titan breaks it, which is a tough watch, but I think I may have gone too far. Nope, that was just Hugo. We're chilling. I believe on the throne. Oh, okay, I might have skipped over it. I think I might be going.
It's okay.
Fast. Anyway, if people can take my word for it and look it up after. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. But I'm pretty sure on the Rosarian throne there are crosses as well. So again,
I was gonna say it would be kind of wild. It would be kind of wild if he had like 3 on him to represent like Father, Son, Holy Spirit, or even if he only has 2 on him, as in like 2 parts of the Trinity. He's the third part of the Trinity, right?
2 spots you touch with the prayer, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. In Catholicism, yeah. So that's also kind of wild, right? Huh. Did not catch that one.
That's just crazy, dude. There's probably, it's so funny. Like,
there's so much
we're not going to talk about today. That was also prevalent. I think we touched on like as many as we probably could. I want to give the chat their due. They've been throwing a lot at us, so I want to see if maybe we can catch up. Let me rewind to the beginning here.
Yeah, go for it, man.
See what we got. Also, shout out to Big Lufa. I had a spoiler in the thumbnail when I first put this up.
Oh,
it wasn't like a huge one. It was just adult Joshua, and like maybe
it's a spoiler.
It's a bit of a spoiler, you know.
Yeah,
it doesn't have an arrow saying, "Look, Joshua's alive," but like, you could see it in the face.
You can tell.
Yeah, so he commented and he was like, "Hey man, I love you." I'll actually read his comment. Landy, brother, I love you and your content and all, but isn't the thumbnail kind of a spoiler for people? I've beaten 16, so I'm not too bothered. But for the sake of the others, and I was like, "Oh God, he's right."
Yeah.
I swapped it out for Clive instantly. But you know, maybe after a year passes, I'll throw Joshua back up as a thumbnail. But anyway, let's see what we got here. Kevin Ribeiro at one point commented, I think it's when we were talking about the creation and destruction paradigm. It says evil cannot create, it can only corrupt what is good.
Yes, spot on.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you see like today. That's what you see that in FF16, right? Or like, oh my gosh, like I mean, like it's so spot on. That's what evil does. Evil is just the absence of good. Evil's just as darkness is the absence of light, just as cold is the absence of heat, right? You don't walk into a room that's dark and say, who turned up the darkness in here?
Yeah,
Oh, so where are the lights? Right. Darkness is just the absence of light. Evil is just the absence of good. Yeah.
And it can only like corrupt and destroy. It's not something that creates. Lindsey Brown comments, diverting a bit. Do you think that Leviathan could have been hidden in the cast based on personality? My guess is it would be Mid. She is obsessed with making the best boat, and whenever she shows up, she sweeps in like a tsunami. I love Mid.
That's so good.
I think Mid was one of those characters that, like...
She was such a feel-good character.
She brought the second half of the Hideout to life. Like the spirit of Sid lived on with Clive, but I feel like
you can see Sid in her.
Yes.
Like, yeah. Like
the
just personality.
That Sid breeds was
Mm-hmm.
alive and in Mid.
Yeah, she became one of my favorite like side characters, honestly, by the end of it, just because like she was always just a joy to be around, you know. I don't think I buy the Leviathan theory, but I like where that went. Like that's really good.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
And it's any excuse to bring up Mid, I'm about it. But I guess to maybe answer that question fully, I don't think Leviathan is hidden among the cast because I think Leviathan's already been dealt with. Because you can't.
Yeah, don't they refer to it as Leviathan the Lost?
I believe
Isn't
so.
that like a I
think he's either been dealt with or something else is going on with him because he can't show up in in a DLC of the future because again the crystals are gone. You know?
I don't remember if they talked about this or if this was just like a thought. But you know how it's in Sambrek. There's like that big area where it's like that massive like kind of like crater and it's like a waterfall that's like all around it. Yeah,
that's where the battle of man and the gods took place.
So I'm wondering if that was like where Leviathan met like their end. You know?
Maybe Leviathan was, let's think about it maybe like this, right? Because they talk about that ancient civilization, and maybe Leviathan was sort of like, let's say the outlaw, you know what I mean? Like the outlaw kind of being the leader of the rebellion against the false gods. Maybe like Leviathan in that age was sort of like the Sid, Clive figure among that civilization. And yeah, I mean, maybe.
It was just a thought.
Water is, I mean, hold on, there might be something to that because water is typically associated with the Leviathan, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah, well that's kind of what I was thinking with that.
What you're getting at, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Is that what kind of? Yeah.
I could buy into that.
What?
Kevin Ribeiro says Clive kind of looks like Jesus. I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you exactly what Jesus looked like, but I promise you he's not white. So, like I'll tell you that much. That's really all I got with that one.
Let's see. I mean, a guy walking around a Middle Eastern desert.
I would say what's his name? Like Ludor or whatever, or what the heck is his name? Not Ludor. I'm blanking on in Dhalmekia. A goofy like what the heck? I'm blanking on his name.
You don't mean
not
Goots,
Ludor.
do you?
No, not Goots.
Okay.
The guy who ends up being.
Dhalmekia.
Remember, he was like he was gonna run for mayor. He ends up being like a branded, but he didn't tell the people, so like they were like super like upset with him. And then like he said, "Oh, like the monsters are coming," and they're like, "We don't believe you, branded," or whatever the heck. And then I can't. It starts with an L. I can't remember his name.
I can't remember.
But I would say that guy would probably look more like Jesus than Clive does, and I'll leave it at that. But yeah,
he's got that dog in him.
He's got that dog in him.
They're going in. Blake Husky says they're going in right now. I'd like to know what that part was when we were going in. Addison Sanders,
I have no idea.
I answered this in the chat, but they asked, do we know if Dion died? And I said Dion is presumed dead.
Presumed dead.
But the follow-up is juicy. Follow-up is juicy, and I think you and I can maybe go back and forth on it for a sec. We talked about it earlier, but then when I said Dion is presumed dead, they said, like Clive? So where do you land? And I actually like that people seem to be split on this, but where do you land on, is Clive dead or alive?
So initially finishing, like, whenever I was watching that scene for the first time, I initially was landing on he died. That's like kind of what I was considering. However, after we've been talking, I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, I guess it kind of could go both ways. Like, he ends up on the beach. You know, like, I don't really know. You know, I'd say initially, first time watch, I was like, I think he died. But I'm just thinking, like, dude, it would be like, it would just absolutely wreck me if he was alive and you get like some kind of DLC and then like him and Joe reunite like as the sun is coming up or something, you know, the dawn. Yeah, I don't really know. I'll say this, I can see it going both ways. Initially, I did see it as I think he died. But after we've been talking, I'm like, yeah, I can see it going either or. So I'm kind of like not sure,
I've
to be
just got
honest.
to be honest, and it might just
Yeah.
be I've had a little too much copium, but I really think he's alive. Because again, we talk about what we were talking about earlier, how I almost think it's this litmus test where if you think Clive died, you're more of a believer in determinism, but if you think he lived, you're more a believer in free will. Because you know, there's one thing I noticed too: characters who tend to die tend to sort of like presuming their death, blood on the mouth. I'm not quite sure that symbolizes something, but I just noticed that as a pattern is like bleeding out of your mouth, coughing out blood seem to precede death in this game a lot, seem to be a predictor. But with Clive, all right, look, out of everything he's been through, after crashing down from Origin, probably into the waters and washing on shore, after everything that guy's been through, every blow he's taken, I don't think he's just going to die passed out on the beach. Like, he's not bleeding out.
Well, I thought
we didn't see the petrification spread. If he does die, it's simply due to petrification.
That was my initial thought, because I was like, yeah, he survived all this. Yeah, like he's probably going to be petrified if he did die.
When Sid overused his powers, we saw some petrification on his hand and arm, and we saw it was something that he had been dealing with at the later end of his life. Yeah. So just because your hand is starting to petrify up doesn't necessarily mean you're going to go. But what I think, the reason why I think solely his hand was petrified, right? Because this is a curse. But remember, this is a curse dependent on ether and bearers and crystals. Now, why did his hand start to petrify? Because he did that crazy finishing blow that took everything in him. So that overuse of power brought
that makes sense
to his hand. And then when he summons the last of it, it took all of him to summon that last of it. You see it as a consequence of him using it. That's what petrifies him. It's not like...
Which is amazing to me, because I'm surprised his hand didn't just fall off after all of that. Like, the fact that he still had a hand after all of that is saying a lot.
Right.
You know?
And remember, if they want to sell us DLC, it is his magic casting hand, not his sword wielding hand. But anyway.
Hey,
Anyway. Petrified hand, but it spread as a consequence of him using it. But now that magic is gone and he can't use it anymore, there's no curse anymore. There's no magic anymore. There's no crystals, no bearers, no dominance. It's all gone. The thing that created the curse is now gone. Clive is stuck with it on his hand because the last moments of magic being in this world, he overused it on his hand. But I think because the magic is gone, the curse is gone, that petrification is not going to spread. Now, that's just me trying to take what the game is telling me at face value. I don't know where it goes from there. But
Right.
again, I
No,
just don't
yeah.
think he goes
Yeah.
through everything he goes through. He washes up on shore. He's not bleeding in the slightest. And
Yeah.
also, like, he's been such a man of free will. Like you said, he mentioned it in that Barnabas cutscene. We talked about it earlier. Even if he was dying and fading out, I don't think for 1 minute he wouldn't be trying to make it back to the hideout. Like, he wouldn't die.
Right.
I'm not saying he would make it back to the hideout safe and sound, but he would die and be petrified crawling his way back, just based on who he's been, you know?
Yeah, and because, and like Jill's there, like, dude, of course, like he's gonna want to try to get back there. Now, I don't know how a DLC would pan out with that. Like, what do you do with content wise with like a DLC where like, oh, maybe like Clive did survive and like. Does he just go back, or like do other things happen? Like, I'm kind of curious as like what you were thinking.
I think if you were gonna do like a Clive DLC, you might have to do it with something that happens in between him destroying Origin and him washing up on shore. You'd have to do it there, and then a cut scene would kind of take him home.
Yeah,
because if you don't have magic and like crystals are gone, there's nothing to fight on your way home, you know?
Right.
But as far as that goes, I guess the last thing I would say too is like, take Jill, for example. Now, in the world where, let's say, Clive did die, I think Jill would cry for more than 30 seconds. I think when she saw that sunrise, it meant something to her. And it's supposed to mean something to us, the viewer, too. You mentioned that cutscene that you unlock at the end of the game where she's like, I learned no matter how dark the night gets, the dawn always comes, and with that dawn comes you, Clive. So just by the dawn rising and Torgal stops howling and whining and Jill starts to smile, I mean, I don't know, man. Like, I know that if I lost my wife, it wouldn't be 30 seconds of crying on a balcony and then smiling at a pretty sunrise.
Right.
You know,
Sure.
There'd be a lot more grief than that. So I have a hard time buying into that too. Also, like, Metia's disappearing as a consequence of the crystals being gone. Not of, you know,
it's not symbolic of like anybody dying or anything.
Right. It was never tied to Clive's life. Like, oh, that's Clive's star. If it goes out, so does Clive. You know? It didn't really
I don't
work
think there's
that way.
anything like that in the game. It was interesting though that you know that's the star that they like prayed to at the beginning, and then like that's the one that goes out at the end. You know. No, like, I mean, as you're talking, I'm like, like, I mean, dude, it could, and I like that it's kind of open-ended. I feel like some people will kind of see it like, you know, one way or the other.
People want their happy ending, bro. It's just there's something in us that really wants it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, take your W's. They're kind of leaving it up to you here.
Yeah.
You know, they really are.
I agree. Yep.
And again, everything with the Harpocrates side quest and the book at the end. I know we're kind of tripping over the ending right now, but I also feel like the ending, right? Okay, like if Joshua is the Jesus figure, was it Jesus that wrote the Bible, Andy?
I mean, the Bible, we as Christians, I believe it's God ordained,
but
right? It's the word of God.
Wasn't it written by the hands of disciples?
It was written. Well, just I mean, the New Testament, the Gospels were written by. So Matthew was a disciple. John was a disciple. Some of them, like Paul, for example, Paul, before he was Paul, he was killing Christians. And he has an encounter with the Lord. And then now he's like the biggest hero of the faith, like right behind Jesus, right? So, and it's, 66 books of the Bible, all written by like, different authors, but you look at the prophecies that are there and it's like, are you telling me that like, that there's like, for example, I know I'm going off topic, but like Genesis 5, the genealogy of Genesis 5 is insane because every name in Genesis 5 in that genealogy, the meanings of their names in the original Hebrew, it spells out a message literally prophesying the coming of Jesus and the salvation It's insane. I'll have to send you a video afterwards breaking it down, but it's nuts. So like, you can't convince me that like authors from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years apart, wrote, because the Bible was written hundreds and hundreds of years apart, like it's just a collection of books. They all conspired to hide a message of salvation in a genealogy, like, or they all conspired to like, to have these, to make up these prophecies, all for them to come true in the New Testament, and for Jesus to fulfill them, and like for the disciples to witness it and to record it. It's like you can write it off as a coincidence, except guess what? There's hundreds of them, thousands of them throughout the Bible. Word of God. Now, with the whole Joshua, and like, Joshua, it's penned as Joshua, right? And I think that's so interesting because it's like penned as Joshua, but if you did the Harpocrates quest, it's Clive that wrote that book.
Right.
In his name.
Right.
Absolutely. Clive's the one narrating. And so kind of a similar, a little bit different, but similar fashion of like, Clive being the one, it's a Clive ordained book, and it's the account of everything that's happened.
Also, you just take for a minute, like the two kids look like Clive and Joshua. They've got the dog just like Torgal. Also, like a key thing, I think the reason I did this on purpose, when they're choosing who's going to be Ifrit, who's going to be Phoenix, and they chose to make the dog Bahamut. And I think that was actually very purposeful, because it shows you whoever wrote that book was fully aware of the end game. You know what I mean? And the only people that are aware of that have to be Clive, Joshua, and Dion. And I know which one I would bank survived. I know which one I would bank on between those three.
That's true. Like, when did he... And that, that actually adds more evidence to like, well, I think maybe he did survive. Because when would he have had time to write the book? If he just died on the beach?
Yeah,
And
like, he's the only one who could have wrote that book.
Joshua's dead. Dion presumed dead, but most I believe 100% that he died. It was just too perfect. It was also just too perfect of a way for him to go out as well, for him to just be alive. But yeah, and with the whole Harpocrates quest,
and
like
Vivian too. Like, there's a Vivian side quest at the end that I don't think enough people talk about, where she, Clive says something like, well, make sure you document this all in history. And then she goes, well, I can't document it unless you come home safe. Like, if you don't come home, I don't know what happened wherever all that happened.
Yeah.
You know? Which
that's
crazy
good
to me. And also, there's
you've sold me on Clive being alive.
I've got one more for
because
you.
of that.
I've
Go
got
for
one
it.
more for you.
Yeah.
It's funny. I've been working on a video of this for weeks. It's taking me weeks, but I'm going to get it out soon. Another thing I got for you. Remember what Jill said to Clive in one of those cutscenes about what they wanted their life to be when this was all over? And they wanted to get away from the twins, and Clive didn't want to just rebuild Rosaria and be a king.
Yeah.
There was no desire for that. There was a desire to get away and live a simpler life. And when we cut to the future, what do you see? You see a very humble life. They're living out in some sort of rural area. They're making fire with stones. It's that humble life that they longed for.
Yeah, that final scene at the end. Yeah, that's good. I never really thought about that.
Well, I mean, they show it to us for a reason. And again, you have the kid who looks a little like Clive. He has this desire to be Ifrit, right? Like it's there.
Funny.
You know what I mean? And I heard, Umbra
so well thought out.
And Umbra, if you watch this, Umbra tells me that the mother's voice actor is the same as Jill. I can't find
really.
This is Umbra, best mod in the game, but he says that the voice actor for the mother is the same as Jill. If anyone, Umbra included, could point me to where it explicitly says that, I would love to include that in the video I'm working on. But
that's kind of that's
neither here nor there.
See that?
It's crazy. There was something else I wanted to say about the book, and like this whole idea that like Clive. I guess I get it. It's like it's almost like that book is the beginning of humanity's free will. Because now that the crystals are no longer around,
yeah,
they don't have that
that's good.
predetermined fate anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
It's at least how I see it.
Let's
keep rolling with the chat. Addison at one point said, "This is honestly starting to remind me of the Master of Masters." I think that's when we were talking about unconscious and conscious, and how, like, from a Christian perspective, the sins are back here, and it's all about maybe they were kind of thinking the foretellers work that way. Like, the master could be ego, and the foretellers could be the unconscious. I don't know. Addison, if you're still with us, feel free to clarify. Lindsey Brown followed up shortly after, says, talking about consciousness more than Ultima. I think you're definitely on the mark here, given that the game's antagonist literally contemplates with consciousness and how to break it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like it kind of sounds like that. Like Ultima almost didn't. That was the one thing that he didn't have his head wrapped around, was consciousness. Because
it was so much different than his. The nature of their consciousness was this whole different thing.
Right. You've got hive mind, but then you've got, like,
individuals.
Again, like individual conscious, where everyone's individual consciousness is so different, and it's like, so that's interesting.
Yeah, I knew someone was going to bring up Persona. Kevin says, in Persona, that's how they control their shadows. They have to face them and everything they're trying to avoid or are scared of. Yeah, that's especially in Persona 4. Persona 4 is a little more on the nose. Persona 5 plays it as, like, this is the part of their personality they're suppressing.
Yeah.
I think Makoto's the best example of that. She's the good girl, class president, school girl, does as she's told. But who is she?
But
really?
Underneath,
she's
biker chick.
She's the biker chick queen.
She's the queen.
Says.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one. Let's see what else we got. Addison says, didn't Clive's voice actor say voicing Clive changed his life?
I definitely remember seeing that. Because he was going through, I think, a time where, I could be wrong, so don't quote me on this, but I think he was dealing with, like, the passing of his dad or something.
Yep, that was it.
He was I'm pretty sure he said that, like, in some scenes, like, he was not acting. Like it was like, and you can hear it.
The grave? You ever visit the grave site?
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, that was beautiful, man. I could feel it.
Oh, there was another scene. Oh, I'm trying to remember when it was. I think it was earlier on in the game. It might have actually been in, like, the Infernal Shadow struggle, but they're, like, the way that whenever he's like, oh yeah, it is because he says, I did this, like, I killed him, and the way that he says it, I'm like, whoa, like.
Do you want me to? It's so funny. I randomly jumped. You know how I have, like, different cuts?
Yeah.
Are you gonna play it? Ifrit cut. I could play it right now if you want.
Sure, play it, man. Play it.
Let me hop back. Like, just a few seconds. Perfect.
You're good.
Dude, it's so intense.
I did this. I killed him.
The way...
Dude, it's so intense, bro. It's so intense. Honestly,
that's some of the best acting that I've seen.
I was just going to say, like,
in a video game.
One thing you can say about this game is, at least as far as Final Fantasy goes, this was the best voice acting in any Final Fantasy game.
1,000%.
Easily. Control, dude.
Oh, yeah.
Come a long way. Kevin Ribeiro says, Clive and Lightning feel like two sides of the same coin, as Benevilza and Ultima. Maybe they meant I don't know what you mean by Benevilza, Kevin. And Ultima are... Oh, Benevilza is from Lightning Returns. I believe so anyway. And Ultima are false gods, claiming they know what's right for all humanity. Even their plan was the same. I am not very familiar on the 13 trilogy. I've only played 13.
I've never played 13, so I'm also unfamiliar.
People are too hard on that game, man. People are too hard on it.
That's what I've heard.
Let's see. Wants another Dissidia. Here we go. I love Clive's last name, Rossfield. It reminds me of the Furion, the hero of FF2. He wanted to bring hope and light back to his people, and he does that. And typos all over the end of that. Okay. Sorry, Kevin. Would have
Yeah.
read that otherwise. Addison says, Landy, you were right on the mark with my comment about the Master of Masters. Okay, so I did get that right. That's when we were talking about foretellers kind of being the unconscious and the master being the ego and how they're currently separated. Cool. All right. That catches us up on chat. Andy,
Yeah.
is there anything left running around your mind? I'm in no rush here, so like,
Dang,
anything
man.
you
I
got
mean,
left?
bro, we went for like 2 hours, man. Like,
Yeah.
I think we covered a lot. I can't really think of anything else outside of just like, again, like just stuff we brought up earlier. There's a lot of like, dude, this game is deep. Like at the end
Very
of the day,
deep.
this game is really deep, and you know, I rarely have time to do second playthroughs of games nowadays, but I'm doing a second playthrough currently of this game, and like, you know, you start to see it more and more, and then you start to kind of yeah, you start to see it more and more, honestly.
There's just so much.
It's there's a lot, and we covered a lot today. We covered a ton, so
Oh, yeah,
I
we got
think
into
I'm
it, man.
good. Yeah,
We
I
got
think I'm
into it.
good.
Kevin says, yes, there are, basically confirming there are crosses on the throne.
Cool.
On the
cool.
Rosefield
That's
throne.
interesting. Cool.
That is interesting. Okay, I think that's gonna wrap us up. This was a great conversation, dude. I always enjoy
This
doing
is
these
fun.
with you.
Yeah, man. I mean, thank you for having me in the lodge again, dude. Like, this is always a fun time. I love talking about games and just getting into getting into some of the deeper meanings of them. You know.
Well, dude, I mean, you
yeah.
earned a FF16 follow up. You know what I mean? After that, we did. Which,
Yeah,
let me
here
tell
we
you
are.
something. You know what the worst part about making like YouTube theories and being right is?
Is whenever I'll tell you what it is, because this happened to me, not with Final Fantasy 16, because I didn't really make pre FF16 content, but like when people will comment on the video being like, dude, you were right, and it's like,
Before you get
I
to
haven't
that
even
point in
played the game yet.
Yeah, dude,
Like,
that happened to me. That
Yep,
happened to me with Torgal.
It's like, bro,
I was like,
yeah.
no, but I'll say, you know what's almost worse? That's probably the worst. But you know what's almost worse is you don't really get to take a victory lap.
Yeah.
Because like,
right.
I could post it everywhere. I was right.com, but it's like, well, great. I'm just gonna spoil it for a bunch of people.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Right.
You almost
you
don't get to have your little. But by the time I can like say like, yo, look, I called this. Yo, look, I called that. People will be like, yeah, but I'm playing Rebirth, dude. Like, who cares?
It's already 2024, dude. Like, we're already up to the next thing.
FF16 predictions? Like, what's wrong with you?
That's amazing.
Who didn't know Torgal was going to be Fenrir? Come on, bro.
Yeah, dude, I'll tell you one thing. There was one thing that I would have loved to see at the end, and I would have loved to see like Torgal like fully prime.
Full Fenrir?
Like full Fenrir. Like, dude, just give me like one like QTE like moment of Torgal fighting Ultima or something, like as a fully prime Fenrir. Man, I would have lost my mind. That was like the one thing I'm like, man, that is something. Again, it was like a not really expecting it, but I'm like, oh, dude, that would have been really cool. Like, really cool.
That would have hit.
Man, yeah.
No, they discovered something special with these icon battles, especially. I imagine that now that they have a system for this and something to build on, we're gonna see a lot of kaiju battles out of Square Enix now.
Oh yeah.
They just have have the system. Honestly, to me, like, I'm someone who I really enjoyed the combat, but I have to say, fighting as Ifrit was my favorite.
I agree. Yeah, it wasn't anything like super mechanical or like, skill issue. You know what I mean? Like, you're not. It was just like, it was fun.
Yeah.
It was simple. It like you have like pretty much the same controls as you do.
Were you a Godzilla fan growing up?
Not growing up, but like when high school going into college, I started to get into like a little bit of like the Godzilla,
the Monsterverse,
the Zillapedia, if you will, right?
Dude, growing up, I loved Godzilla. Like I had,
Oh yeah.
I wish I never got rid of him. Maybe my parents preserved him. I'm hoping, but I have all the like old Japanese VHS tapes with
Wow.
like the bad lip syncing and the subtitles.
Yeah.
Like, dude, I was obsessed with Godzilla, and like I played some of these Godzilla video games that have come out throughout the years, but like playing as Ifrit to me was like, it almost awoke that kid in me that loved Godzilla so much.
Dude,
You know?
like the Bahamut fight was literally Godzilla versus King Ghidorah.
Dude,
like
yeah, I was
that's
thinking
what
the
it
same
was.
thing.
like and it was awesome.
It was so good.
Yeah.
Dude, gotta be my
Yeah.
favorite fight in the game was the Bahamut fight.
Yeah, Garuda felt like Godzilla and Mothra, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like it was Bahamut 100% was the best fight in the game.
Yeah.
For me,
But you know something though? Titan is a closer second for me than I think.
Yeah, I think on a spectacle standpoint, Titan was like, dude, the moment that got me, funny enough, it wasn't even like the massive Titan loss moment. It was like after that when you're falling
Yes.
and you're still fighting. I'm like, what is
Dude,
this
yes.
game right
Bro,
now?
bro.
Like, are you serious? Oh man.
It was King Kong versus Godzilla. That's what it was.
That's what that, yeah.
Were you disappointed that we didn't really get like an Odin Ifrit showdown? Where do you come out on that?
So that's so hard. It's like a little bit, but at the same time, I think it kind of balanced itself out by giving us one of the best like humanoid fights in the game. To be honest,
And I think Clive and Barnabas were such a contrast of one another that they had to fight in that form.
yeah, and because like initially I was like, man, I would have wanted to do like a little more with Ifrit, against Odin, but like with what they gave us, I'm like, man, like I'm pretty happy with it,
Yeah, me too.
Because I agree with you, because I mean even down to their color scheme.
Yes.
Black and red versus the black and like indigo or dark blue or whatever Barnabas was. Like,
And think
yeah.
about it. If you take Clive and Jill and Sid away from, not Clive, if you take Jill and Joshua and Sid and Torgal away from Clive, he ends up like Barnabas. What was Barnabas' problem? He never really had anyone like that.
Dude, I really thought at one point that they were going to be related. And it was going to be like a battle of kings or like a battle of brothers or something.
The way Clive's mom was sleeping around.
Honestly. Yeah.
Could have been.
So.
Could have been.
Yeah. Could have been.
Yeah. But, Seven Heart says need that Leviathan DLC immediately. That seems to be the most popular demand. People want a Leviathan DLC.
Dude, give me like, do it like FF15. Give me episodes. Give me episode Jill. Give me episode Sid. Give me episode Joshua. Like all that time that we missed out on with these characters, like fill in the, like, I want to see those gaps. Like even go as far as like episode Barnabas. like honestly, I mean, that's what I would like them to do. But honestly, any DLC that they throw out for this game, I'll eat that up.
And they know it. They know it.
Yeah.
They're going to do a little FF14 work first, but then we'll
get
that DLC real quick. Speaking of which, Lindsey Brown says DLC is just the game, but you play as Torgal. And now, and now Clive is your D-pad.
Man.
You give Clive commands on the D-pad.
That's wild. You know what's funny? Kind of off topic, but again, I was listening to our previous podcast, and you were talking about how I really hope we get like strong AI if we're only going to be controlling Clive. But honestly, like after like playing the game, it's like, because the AI don't even really feel like they're there, like to be honest. But I'm kind of glad it was that way, because you have so much that you can do with Clive. It almost feels like giving more commands would be like too much.
Well, I think too, like one thing I did appreciate with the AI is it made a how do you put it? It made a point not to target whoever you were targeting. If there were basically, if you were in a mob fight and you were targeting one character, Jill, Sid, Torgal, they would target other characters in the mob to stay out.
They're always on party attack, right? In Kingdom Hearts 2 terms. Yeah.
Yep. Kevin Ribeiro says he is 1,000,000% on board to play as Barney.
Yeah.
Play as King Barney, excuse me.
King Barney. That's right.
Can't disrespect King Barney. But yeah, I think we could wrap it up here. We're at like 2 hours and 10 minutes.
A
Andy,
long one. Yeah.
You want to let people know what you got going on before we wrap it up?
Yeah, sure. So, in case you guys are wondering, I do have my entire live playthrough of Final Fantasy XVI on my YouTube channel. So you can check out all my streams there. I have a couple of like other videos, just of like moments that I uploaded separately, for people to find. If you are looking for something specific, you don't want to watch a whole stream, I get it. So I do that sometimes, depending on if I have time and like the content. So yeah, my whole FF16 playthrough is on there. In terms of me right now, I mean, I'm working on a Final Fantasy. I'm writing the script for a Gospel According to FF16 video.
I mean, dude, you have the wealth of knowledge, dude.
We talked about a lot of it in this podcast, and so I do want to put that in video form at some point in the future. I recently started my first playthrough of Final Fantasy X, so we are doing that right now. Another game that I'm 3 streams in. It's becoming one of my favorites already from all the biblical stuff alone.
Bet the lodge.
Yeah.
I told you.
Yeah, you did.
The lodge.
Yeah.
I think it's a safe bet. What can I say?
Yeah. So that's kind of what I got going on in terms of just me. We just hit 1K on Twitch, so that's awesome. So I'll be planning some kind of stream sometime soon, and we do a variety of things. I'm playing some Kingdom Hearts as well. We're doing a platinum trophy run of the series, kind of casually. So yeah, a lot of things we do over here where I'm at on my little corner of the internet. So if that interests you, I mean, hey, that's where I'm at. So there you go.
If that interests you, you all know where to find him. I've got his link in the title, link in the description. You guys know how it goes at this point. Andy, always a pleasure talking to you. I think we always make for great conversation when we kind of dive into these like symbolisms and like
all the deep stuff.
All the deep stuff, dude. Because again, I think you and I both have a plethora of knowledge about different things. You know what I mean?
And I think that's what makes these super fun, because I learn a lot from like what you tell me,
dude,
or what you bring up, and so it's always a good time. So.
Dude, yeah. I mean, I feel like I want to say I do it for y'all, the audience, but no, I talk to Andy for selfish reasons. I want to learn more about all these things. It is completely self-preserving, self-motivating. I'm not going to
right.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, on that note, we're gonna wrap
very
up
Mythos of you. Anyway,
on that note, we're gonna wrap it up, everybody. We got another episode coming on Sunday. I guess I can if everyone's here, if you deserve it. If you made it to the 2-hour, 11-minute mark of this podcast, you deserve to know this. If you're watching live, you deserve to know this. On Sunday, we're having regular Pat on. We're talking about the Child of Destiny in Kingdom Hearts. I'm also going to pick his brain on his love for Kingdom Hearts 1, because I think it is, I think because so much of the conversation right now is like Cage 3 versus Cage 2. I feel like Cage 1 isn't getting the
Kingdom Hearts 1, if I may.
Yeah.
Kingdom Hearts 1 is like the Ava of like, don't get involved in any battles. Forget about, go make your own union. All right. Like that's, and I'm here for it, like,
dude, it's, at the end of the day, whatever you feel about it, it's the game that started everything. And if it wasn't a classic to begin with, then it would have never caught on in the way it did. But anyway, we got more of that coming on. I swear I'm going to get that FF16 video out to you guys about the ending, making my case in a little bit more of a neatly packaged way for Clive's survival, because I do believe that to be the definitive ending. If I'm wrong, I'll wear it on my sleeve. But and then
I'm with you.
Dude, lots of good stuff coming. But anyway, I'm done yapping. I'm not going to stop if I just keep going. So thanks for hanging out, everybody. Andy, thanks for coming on, and we will talk to you all next time.